Hi everyone, Oscar McCook here. I'm back with Duckling's Alchemical Theater, a special Winter Solstice edition, hopefully a short version of Amor. Amor is Spanish for love. It stems from the Latin, and in Spanish and Portuguese, it's amor, in Italian amore, and French amour. A medieval fedeli d'amore, faithful of love, initiate Jacques de Bassieux used amour as a more, without death. A meaning without, and more from death, from the Latin. Actually, it's missing out. As, and etymologically, it may not be accurate, but this is how he used it. And I think the first time I've heard of this was from Joe Campbell back in the 80s in The Power of Myth. In any event, the Fedeli d'Amore, which Dante was one of, wanted to imply with the word amor, without death, that love could overcome physical death and, interestingly enough, is linked to spiritual resurrection. Spiritual resurrection. Here's a quote from the Song of Songs. Set me as a seal upon thine heart, as a seal upon thine arm, for love is strong as death. If you recall this slide from my very first presentation, I've added here on the top, and the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die. Ye shall not surely die. Then I skipped the rest because, as I said, I've already discussed this slide in the first presentation. But we'll get down to the curse, at least one of the curses for the moment. And in 319, it says, Till thou return unto the ground, for out of it wast thou taken, for dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return. I remember these words from our Ash Wednesday processions. What I didn't appreciate as a child when I heard those words the first times is that this is a reference to Genesis 2:7. Let's go back to Genesis 2:7. This is again from my very first presentation. I took this slide to remind us that in Genesis 2:7 it says, And the Lord God formed Vayitza, the man Ha Adam, of the dust of the ground, Ha Adamah. What was interesting in that time was the fact that the word for formed had two yods in it, implying the dual nature. But what I wanted to focus on now is the fact that the curse that we just read about is a reference to the formation and dust of the ground. But what happens to this Adam in Genesis 1:27 that was from the world of creation and was made in God's image? In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. So the death or apparent death that we read about, or we just read, happens to be regarding the world of formation. But what of the Adam in the world of creation? Here I just wanted to throw a few little facts to help jog the mind a little bit because we get caught in the spell of the sensuous and forget to pay attention to little details. And one of the interesting things is that in Genesis, there are no fallen angels. There are no fallen angels anywhere in Genesis. In fact, there is no devil in Eden, or the Old Testament for that matter. The serpent of Eden is referred to as Nakash and was never referred to as the devil or Satan. This is from Mary Leith, who's a professor of biblical studies and anthropology. We'll hear more about her later, not today, but later. Interestingly, in a publication of hers named From Seraph to Satan, Shape Shifting in the Garden of Eden. She goes on to add Satan in Job is not a character bearing this name, but a heavenly official with the title Satan, prosecutor. You've heard this before from me, I think, but it's good to get different opinions. Interestingly, she points out further that the first to bear the title Satan is King David. One can read it in 1 Samuel 29:4, but I have it here for us. He may become an adversary, Satan, to us in battle. Fascinatingly, King David, or David, is Daleth, Vav Daleth, and means beloved. Beloved. Hmm. Interesting things to consider. Now, you've heard from me last time that Ayin means the eye. I will expand that. Ayin is the eye as the organ of sight. Sight refers to our physical ability to see. The eyes capture light and converts it to electrical signals. Vision, on the other hand, is the brain's ability to interpret those signals and form images. Hmm. Donald Hoffman, who spent most of his life researching, writing about, and studying consciousness, tells us in a recent book called The Case Against Reality Why Evolution Hid the Truth from Our Eyes. The Case Against Reality Why Evolution Hid the Truth from Our Eyes. Not an easy read, but a very, very interesting and highly recommended read. I just want to quote one small sentence from his work. He tells us that perception is not a window on objective reality. It is an interface that hides objective reality behind a veil of helpful icons. Perception is not a window on objective reality. It is an interface that hides objective reality behind a veil of helpful icons. It's interesting, the card of the emperor that I have here on the right is referred to as He in Hebrew, and in our correspondence refers to a window. He represents vision, whereas the devil on the left represents sight, the eye as the organ of sight. Ginsburg tells us in the Hebrew letters that coveting is a spiritual blemish of the sight of the eye. Coveting is a spiritual blemish of the sight of the eye. In Matthew, I forgot to cite it here. In Matthew, we can read that the light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. It's interesting to note that the emperor is shown looking towards the north with a single eye being represented. A single eye. The devil, of course, being a chimera, represents mirth through its incongruity. But how many of us can laugh at the view of the devil? And like I asked last time, how many of us are willing to lift those chains from around our heads and walk away to our liberation? This is a very interesting citation from Wilmshurst. We've had a lot of Wilmshurst. Somehow I like him as a writer. The sleep of the body becomes the awaking of the soul, and the closing of the eyes, true vision, and silence becomes impregnated with God. Wilmshurst quotes Synesius, Bishop of Cyrene, who says to initiates, "You who have been initiated in the mysteries know there to be two pairs of eyes, the bodily and the mental, and that the lower pair must be shut when the upper pair open, and that when the latter pair close, the latter ones reopen." This may lead some clarity as regarding of eyes opening and closing that we heard so much about in our first reflection, our first opportunity to bring forth what Duckling's Alchemical Theater is all about. We're continuing with Wilmshurst, this time from Masonic Initiation. An initiate has an expansion of consciousness and faculty, enabling him to behold the ethereal worlds revealed to Jacob and see the angels of God ascending and descending. An initiate can witness the descent of human essences or souls, as Izzy mentioned, through planes of increasing density and increasing vibratory rate, gathering around them as they come veils of matter, gathering around them as they come veils of matter, until reaching this level of complete materialization, where the struggle for supremacy between the inner and the outer man, between the spirit and the flesh, between the real self and the unreal selves, and veils built around it, has to be fought out on the checker work floor of our present existence, among the black and white, opposites of good and evil, light and darkness, prosperity and adversity. Eyeing, the eye, stands for the consciousness of the renewing intelligence. And Ginsberg tells us that the eye of God is a divine providence and harmony apparent in all the workings of nature. From the Mystery of the Ages, Marie Caithness says, "The destroyer or serpent of Genesis is most certainly the renovator or preserver of the human race through earthly or material generation." This light takes us now to a whole new level of understanding of astrology and the cosmos, which we're not ready to go into yet. We'll continue these speculations on this serpent of Genesis next time. For now, I say thank you and I wish you a wonderful winter solstice.